problems. And we're not happy about that, but that is what happens in life. There we have Michael on the screen. I don't know if he can hear us.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
He can hear us.
Yes.
And that's a good day. Now, I will tell you folks out there, we don't know how long Michael will be here that he can hear us. And those of you out there who know Michael Murphy, you know that is a feat in and of itself. But right now, he can hear us, and we're excited about that. We have some amazing, my name is Jeanine LaRue, and this is the LaRuelist Cafe. We will be bringing on guests every Friday. For right now, it will be at 5 o'clock. But I am certain as we get back to work and back to our offices and commuting, it will be probably a little later in the evening. We have a lot of topics we're going to cover, but tonight we're going to talk real deal stuff. As you can see, this is not a button down chat or interview that we have on LaRuelist Cafe. We're going to deal with real issues. We have three amazing guests who have been living in sobriety for a combination of about 60, 70 years. Their stories are compelling. We have Michael Murphy, who many people know because he is a statewide lobbyist. He's a lawyer, former county prosecutor. He is one amazing man. He is the son of a governor. But I will tell you that even with all of those titles, the issue he's going to talk about here tonight, it doesn't escape any of us. We also have Jeanine Carlos. Jeanine Carlos is the founder of an amazing nonprofit. She is the daughter of an Olympian, John Carlos. Everyone knows him from 1968 when he went to Mexico City and put that fist up in the air. And we still honor him all of these years for what he did. Kimmy's going to talk about her whole issue of dealing with, and her story is a little different because we're talking about as a teenager. She's going to talk about her issue of dealing with alcoholism. And then we have Maureen Denman. Maureen has been in healthcare in Morristown. She's working for New Jersey Transit right now. I see she's been at the Cancer Institute at Rutgers. She has an amazing story. And this program is not going to be about Jeanine LaRue. It is going to be about their stories and what they're going to leave on the table for us today. I know that this whole panel, all of them probably can help someone who is out there right now who may be struggling with addiction. They may be struggling with, and if we could see the whole panel, who may be struggling with other types of behavioral issues, not just alcoholism or drug abuse. We're hoping that today we can deal with those issues. So we're going to start with Michael. Michael, give us a little background on yourself, please.
Okay, is my mic muted? Am I good?
You are absolutely good.
Thank you for that very flattering introduction, Jeanine. I'm always a little nervous when somebody says Michael is a son of a, and then mic's muted. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, the way I introduce myself at the meeting, at the 12-step fellowship meetings, I say, "Hi, Murph, I'm an alcoholic." And I've been saying that for over 32 years now. There's a lot of alcoholism in my family. Happily, as my late father, technically stepfather, Richard Hughes, told me many, many years ago, he said, we have a tragic history of alcoholism in this family, but we have a very happy history of recovery. He says, when you get out there to rehab, just do as you're told. And when you come back, keep doing the 90 and 90, whatever you're expected to do, and you're going to be fine. So it was very encouraging. And just a short story, I took my brother Tim out to rehab. We lost him a few years ago to the disease. he returned the favor 2 or 3 years later. I took another brother out to rehab. So right now, out of the 10 kids and the adult children, 7 of us, 5 are in recovery. So we have had a happy history of recovery through the 12 steps of the Fellowship of AA. My turnaround moment was in 1987. I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I was praying on it, and I was looking for an answer. And the answer kept coming back from friends and from my higher power. You need to get to AA. And I kept saying, well, something other than, it was bargaining. If I cut down, if I only drink beer, if I only have 2 drinks at night. And finally, around Christmas time of 1987, I had a mini intervention with my wife, my late brother, and his wife. And they all agreed that it was time for me to check into rehab and turn my life around. I did, and it's been nothing but good ever since. 3 years after I came into the fellowship, Governor Jim Florio took a chance on me because I was in relatively early sobriety, and submitted my name to the New Jersey Senate for confirmation as county prosecutor. So my anonymity there's not much left of it, and I really don't care about it, to tell you the truth. I'm very open about my recovery, but having told the New Jersey State Police, the governor's office, the Senate, and many other people since that time, I've found that I'm able to help other people simply by making myself available and being open about my recovery. Looking forward to the rest of this show. Thanks, Jeanine.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that. And I know that, and I'm going to come back to you, Michael, because of your statewide stature. I have some questions specifically for you. Right now, Kimmy, tell us about your story.
First, let me just say, Jeanine, I'm so delighted to be on the panel. Thank you so much for bringing this topic to the forefront, especially right now while we're in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. There are so many people that are either in recovery or struggling or will fall out of recovery, or people who will fall into addiction and alcoholism because of this crisis. So I'm really, really pleased to be able to participate. So let me share a little bit about myself. As Jeanine said, I am Kimmy Carlos, and I'm the founder of the Urban Mental Health Alliance. And I am the proud daughter of Dr. John W. Carlos, 1968 Olympian and social justice giant. And I am probably the baby in the group. I'm 17 years clean and sober. It'll be 18 years in November, which I'm really excited about. And I had an unusual childhood, obviously, right? Because I grew up the child of an icon, but also because I lost a parent to suicide when I was very young. And obviously that was a traumatic experience for me. I was 12 when my mother passed. I'm very open and transparent about that. I share that story a lot while I share my own journey. And so by the time I was 14 is when I fell into active alcoholism. And I went in and out of active alcoholism for the next 20 odd years, about 23 years. I was what you call a functioning alcoholic, but I don't ascribe to that word because there really is no such thing as a functioning alcoholic. I was an alcoholic college graduate, and I was an alcoholic wife and mother, and I was an alcoholic homeowner. But I was never functioning. And when I got to the end of my active alcoholism, I was easily putting away a pint a day of liquor. And I was very, very blessed and fortunate that I worked for a large financial institution at the time that basically said either you need to go to rehab or you're going to lose your job. And even in my active alcoholism, I knew that I had a mortgage to pay and that I needed to take care of my 2 children. I was divorced by then. And so I basically was all they had at that point. And how fortunate was I that this organization actually sent me to rehab. I went through rehabilitation at Princeton House, and they put me on paid disability, and they even supported me through outpatient support groups, and then they gave me my job back. And so I am extremely aware of how grateful I am. I tell people all the time, my drug of choice was alcohol, and that probably has a lot to do with why my situation was a little different. Because there are a lot of other really good people who are struggling through addiction who are in the abandoned houses and are in back alleyways because their drug is not legal, because their drug is not accessible. If alcohol hadn't been legal and accessible, but by the grace of God, there go I. So I have spent the last 17 years in recovery, really advocating for mental health and wellness and addiction and alcohol recovery, because I'm really, really passionate about that. So again, I'm delighted to be able to talk about it today. And I look forward to sharing more.
Thank you so much, Kimmy. Thank you. Maureen, want to hear from you. I know that you told me your family story and story about your sister. I have to tell you, that kept me up all night. Tell us about your story. Oh, we lost her sound again.
Oh, yeah, we lost the sound.
How about now?
We have you. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just first wanted to thank you for being brave enough to address this issue. You know, in the midst of this pandemic, I remember one of my first thoughts was somebody early in recovery, and we refer to that as counting days. And how important it was for me to have the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to go to. And it made me worry, you know, about those people counting days, not having access. Thankfully, the Zoom meetings are great and have been a blessing, but this is a scary time. And, you know, I learned very young, my family's not quite as large as Michael's, but I come from a long line of addicts and alcoholics. And I am the sixth of 7 children, and a good half of us have this disease. And unfortunately, not all of us found recovery in this disease. But, you know, I learned early on, and I was sharing this with you the other day, that in order to get rid of the way I felt, all I had to do was eat sugar. And, you know, my mother said, oh, chocolate makes everything better. And she was right. And for a little child, it did. It, you know, it made me forget whatever I was sad about. But at 12 years old, the first time I drank a 6-pack, I found my new love. And, you know, subsequently, you know, I experimented with every single drug out there. Nancy Reagan was big on the just say no. I was big on the just say yes. But, you know, it was a horrible, horrible, you know, a place for me. I was, as others were progressing and making the choices that one does, you know, I was not making those choices. My only concern was, you know, when I was going to drink again, when I was going to drug again. But, you know, I believe that God got me and saved me because at the age of 25, after trying to overdose, I ingested enough heroin that should have killed me. I woke up and I picked up the phone and I called my father. That poor man had no idea what he was getting his hands into. And that was, you know, my surrender. You know, I was at the place where I couldn't imagine another day without drinking and drugging, and I couldn't imagine another day with drinking and drugging. And I know that sounds insane, but that's exactly what brought me to my knees. And off to rehab, I had the extended stay because I had full-blown hepatitis when I arrived at rehab. But, you know, this is a one day at a time way of living. You know, you mentioned how many years all of us have, but the person with the most time is who got out of bed earliest this morning, because it's about today. And, I don't know if I'm going to drink tomorrow, but for today, through the grace of God, for a string of years, I've been able to stay sober. And I have, my life is not, without problems. We all face problems. We're all living with this pandemic, this unknown. But now I have the tools to deal with it. And, I have joy in my life today. My husband, well, you didn't see him, but
I did.
handled it earlier. I met him at a meeting. I couldn't stand him when I first met him. But, God has a way of bringing people into our lives. It's like Michael. Michael and I used to go to the Florham Park meeting together back in, the late 80s. That's where I met him early on. There's a way of living without picking up. And if somebody's watching this tonight and struggling, I know exactly how you feel. We all do. There's no drink, there's no drug that's worth giving up your sobriety for.
Thank you so much, Maureen. Thank you so much.
Certainly.
So we have another guest who has arrived. I know a little bit about this particular guest because we shared the womb of my mom together, and he is my twin brother. And it's kind of interesting when I say to the three of you, tell me your story, some would think, well, she knows his story, but the fact that he ended up where he did, it's obvious that I didn't. Jimmy Frisbee, tell us your story.
Hi, my name is Jim. I'm an alcoholic. Today I live on faith. I had faith that I would get here, even though I thought I was left out. But, my sobriety date is March 20th, 1986. The thing of it is, it's been a journey getting here, even today. With what's happening today, I still can have faith that someone else is running the show, because when I do it, it doesn't work. My addiction started, I would say, when I was in the military. I joined the Army so I wouldn't get drafted in 1968. 69. I didn't want to go to Vietnam, but I didn't get drafted. I joined and I ended up in Vietnam anyway. My childhood, as Jean knows, it was just childhood. Growing up at the right time in the right place. And there wasn't any addiction or alcoholic behavior around us. I know before I left for Vietnam, the few weeks before I left, I tried to party and I ended up drinking beer. And every time I drank it, I got messed up. And when I was finished and left for Vietnam, I figured drinking was not for me. I didn't even like it. I spent a year and a half in Vietnam. Of course, other things came in play. I had never seen drugs in my life, and first time I ever seen drugs is when I was in my unit. It didn't impress me, but with being in the war, I was a truck driver, and being in the war, there's boredom, and then there's all of a sudden a lot of action. And it just, I don't know, the whole thing about being there was you counted backwards, soon you hit the ground, 365 days. And that was our goal, to make 365 days. Within that time, I did get addicted to drugs, heroin, and I ended up leaving out of Vietnam. I guess like cold turkey, right on out of there. In fact, the family knew nothing about it. I think I cold turkeyed on a plane from Vietnam all the way to Philadelphia International. Uh, and from there, I was sent to Germany. I had 9 more months left in the Army. And I got to Germany and still a truck driver. And it was like a 9 to 5. Uh, we just went out, drove all day, came in 4 o'clock, and everybody went to the EM Club. And everybody seemed to be having fun at the EM Club, drinking whatever they was drinking. And I figured, well, I'm not into the drugs anymore. Maybe I'll get the hang of this drinking. And that's where I actually started drinking. I was 21 at the time. And I would buy half a gallon of Jim Beam on a Friday, and it'd be gone by Sunday night. And most people couldn't understand how I could drink it straight and just, not fall out or anything. I thought that was the way you drank. I got my first lesson in alcoholism one morning, Monday morning after drinking all weekend. I had a queasy stomach, sweats, and one of the guys who was actually drinking with me said, "What you need is another drink." I said, "Another drink?" And he says, "Yeah, that'll fix you up because you've been drinking all weekend." So I got a warm beer. I drank that, and it made me feel better. And I said, "Oh, okay." Not knowing that was my first lesson as an alcoholic, to get that drink in the morning. When I left Germany, I came home. I don't know, the war kind of matures you in a way of speaking. I felt older than everybody my age. And everyone, after 3 years, they went separate ways and I couldn't catch up with anybody. Most people didn't even know where I was. When I would tell them I went to Vietnam, they would feel sorry for me, say, "Oh, poor thing. You really had a hard time." And no, I didn't have a hard time. This is what I wanted to do. Not go to Vietnam, but being in the military. So I got a job uh, through the help of family, working for an electric company. Really good job. But things, I just wasn't, I just didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. So I started drinking just a little bit to take the edge off, something to just keep me numb, not to get drunk. In fact, I hated getting drunk. I just always wanted to keep edge off, numb. That went for 18 years until there was a lot that happened in between. The day I shouldn't even be here, shouldn't even be alive, really. And after 18 years, I married. Life was should have been good by then, but I couldn't put the bottle down, and I ended up getting really sick to the point that I ended up in the hospital one March 20th. Never forget it. Um, didn't know what was wrong with me. In emergency, doctor said, "I'm going to try to help you." And they had asked me if I wanted to go to rehab. I guess they smelled the alcohol. I don't know. But they asked me if I wanted to go to rehab. And for some reason, I said, "Yeah, I'll go to rehab just to get them off my back, whatever." Because my wife and I had actually argued the night before about me going to rehab. I did not want to go. But anyway, they took me in emergency. I ended up being in ICU for a week. This was told to me after I got out of rehab because I had no semblance of time or anything. All I know is in and out, in and out. At
So
one
Jim, I'm going to ask you a question. Let me ask you a quick question. So,
mm-hmm.
so you ended up in ICU, and they basically told you only had a few months left to live. Tell me the moment when you found out how serious your health was. You went down to the dentist, and what happened?
Oh, well, yeah, because I really didn't know how sick I was. And I ended up going to rehab. Wasn't my idea, but I went up. And for the first week, counselor, I would just joke about alcohol. And the second week, counselor asked me a question. He says, "What are you going to do if you drink again?" I said, "Oh, I'll come back to rehab." And he said, "No, you're going to come back to the morgue." And I couldn't understand what he was saying. He said, "Go look on your chart. You've had 3 congestive heart failures, your liver shot, and there's a part in there, 35-year-old man with the body of a 76-year-old man. And, my thought was he's saying all this to make a point. Well, at that time, I went to the dentist while I was in there. And I'm at the desk, and she's looking at my chart. She looks at me, she looks at my chart, and then she closes and she says, I can't touch you. I said, why not? And she says, because you're really sick. And it dawned on me everything the counselor had said, he wasn't lying. And at that point, I said, well, I've been drinking all these years, killing myself. What if I don't drink and try to live? And that was the point that I decided that I'm gonna try to wake up every morning. And every morning I do wake up, it's a blessed morning. And I've been waking up for the last 34 years. But recovery is up and down. There's a lot of faith. But my best day in my drinking days do not compare to my worst day in recovery, because when I have a bad day in recovery, I'm learning something. I've worked with the in mental health. I've worked with homeless and the addicts, and it's been a good journey working with other people. So
okay, so now thank you so much. I call you 20 Winnie, and I will always call you 20 Winnie.
sorry I'm late.
Are always your stories are compelling. We're going to do some wrapping up here in a minute. Before we do it, I want this panel, I want the entire panel's optic to stay up here. I want to see the whole panel, because right now there are some people I know who are watching this. A lot of folks through YouTube and through various Facebook pages, and they are struggling. Not everybody is struggling with alcohol or drugs. Some people are struggling. I had one woman tell me she is ordering from Amazon every 3 to 4 hours and she doesn't need anything. And so she has all these packages coming. She's got to clean them all up. She can't stop. I will tell you that I have a glass of wine every single night now. I didn't drink a glass of wine every single night before I felt I was in lockdown. And I look in the mirror and I say to myself, Jeanine, excuse me, there are people dealing with a lot of things. And what I would like to ask you, and Michael, you told me about Zoom meetings. Tell me about these AA Zoom meetings. Oh, we lost his voice again.
Well, no, you have me muted, dear.
I'm so happy.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, Jeanine, because the Zoom meetings are the platform of Zoom, and I don't know whether it's true of the other. I guess we have over 100 years of sobriety here on the panel.
Yes.
But shortly after the lockdown, I had the same feelings that Maureen did, and I suspect probably Kimmy and Twinny, that how are we going to get to a meeting? I was speaking to my sponsor, other people in the fellowship. And then the Zoom meetings popped up, and I've been going to meetings, my regular meetings, as well as, not that I feel threatened, but I have more time on my hands, although I'm pretty busy remotely. And Zoom has meetings all over the country, all over the world. I went to a meeting in Ireland remotely. I go to my regular Saturday morning meeting, Mondays and Wednesdays. Meetings in Manhattan on 43rd Street, down in the Village on Perry Street. So it's really been a boon. It's not the same thing as going to a live meeting, but it's as close as we can get to stay sober. The other thing I wanted to mention, because Jeanine, you mentioned people shopping addictions, and I know, and I'm told from some of the friends in Gamblers Anonymous and those working with them that there's an enormous increase in online gambling. Another thing, and I have several friends who work in this space, domestic violence is very much on the
It's
rise.
huge. It's huge.
It's just tragic. People are in there, and people are afraid to reach out and get help because they're afraid they're going to get kicked out of their own home. So I'm not going to suggest that domestic violence is an addiction, but it's clearly a sickness and it's
Yes.
criminal, and people don't have to live like that.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I am glad that you.
On
Go ahead.
Zoom, let me just, if any one person, as a result of the 4 or 5 of us speaking, finds their way into recovery, this has been absolutely worth it. If you go online and look up AA Zoom, you'll find dozens of meetings right nearby. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask a question. So now that we are in recovery and we're on lockdown, what do you folks do during the day? I mean, because folks who are not in recovery, we have a hard time figuring out what to do with our time. And I'd like to know, what do you do? Kimmy, what do you do with your day?
Well, that's a great question. First, I want to just give a shout out to Mr. James when he said, "What if I stop drinking and live?" I love that. That is my quote of the day, because that's really what happens when you decide to put down the addiction, right? Whatever the drug is you begin to finally live, and the longer you live, the better it gets. So yeah, that's difficult, right? And I have said to more than one person, I'm so glad that I am as far in recovery as I am, because the first 5 years of recovery, I think, are really, really difficult. You're just trying to get the hang of being a functioning adult in those first 5 years, right? You don't really begin to grow until you've got some years under your belt. And so I'm so grateful that I'm this far along in recovery, where I know that I don't have to drink in the midst of a crisis. I've learned enough strategy skills and life coping skills. So, and I'm still working. I work remotely at home. I'm blessed and fortunate that I've been able to literally just bring my laptop home and work for the last 6-7 weeks. So that occupies a lot of my time. I spend a lot of time in prayer, meditating, and I stay plugged into what I call my tribe or my village, all the folks in my life that are important to me. I make sure that I'm spending time with them on the phone, in Zoom. And then I also have a lot of hobbies that I do at home. For me, it's a matter of keeping myself focused and occupied on what's positive and what's productive. And that really is what helps me to maintain my sobriety. I strongly believe that I have a purpose, and I work really hard to meet that purpose. And I know that I can't bring my best self if I ever go back to drinking. And I don't ever want to feel, how Michael and Mr. James talked about being sick. I remember those days. I remember being so sick and swearing I would never drink again. And how many lies I told, before I would go get my next bottle of liquor. So I'm grateful, that I have been sober as long as I've been while we're going through this crisis, because I have the emotional and the mental bandwidth, to do this with sobriety at this point.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Maureen, I want to know what you do with your day. I know I think you chair the Housing Authority, right?
I do. I chair the Housing Authority and I chair the Environmental Commission. I'm a real glutton for punishment. But much the same as Michael said, Zoom meetings have been a blessing and a constant for me. I'm just tickled that I can be on a meeting. I was on a women's meeting out of California over the weekend, and it's so fascinating. I've gone to meetings all over the world, and even when you're not speaking the same language, you know what? You can tell by people's facial expression, that they understand what it is that you're talking about. One of the things I don't do is watch back-to-back news on the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things I learned with this program is, I can only control so much. And I make a decision daily to turn my will and my life over to God, who kept me alive, because left to my own devices, like like Twinnie said, I would not be here. I should not be here. But, you know, I did want to bring something up because, you know, you're talking about the numbers, and I just saw a report from our sheriff in Morris County, and the heroin overdoses are up 38% compared to 2019. And you know, he blames it on COVID, and you know, people are scared, and you know, they don't see a way out, and there is a much better way. You know, everybody has talked about it. You know, Kimmy touched on it. You know, this ability to get through life without drugs or alcohol, you know, trust me when I tell you, it seems so foreign to me. And, you know, when I walked into that rehab, so Jimmy, you got a year more than me. You got sober on March 20th, 86, and I got sober March 15th, 87. I love that we're like within the same month. But I walked into that rehab now. Back then, you got a picture, it's the 80s. I had a mohawk. I was bright yellow with jaundice. And they connected me with a guy who looked like John Denver, the little round glasses. He had the jacket with the patches on his sleeves. And I sat down and I thought, this man is never going to be able to say anything to me. And the minute he opened his mouth, like the tears just flowed, because it doesn't matter what we look like. We don't need to look like what we feel, what drugs and alcohol have done to our souls. There is a way out, you know, and you know, all everybody on this call has touched on it. You know, if you're thinking about picking up today, just wait till tomorrow. Just get through today. You know, there is so much this life has to offer. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. There is one more thing I do want to raise before we do the serenity prayer with each other and sign off. Kimmy, one of the things that you said to me a couple of days ago, how long it took you to be sober. You know, that I thought about that when you said, you know, I guess it was like 2 years or something. I'm like, well, how the heck does that happen? You know, because most people say, okay, my day of sobriety was this year. And you confessed something to me that made me know, you know what? We're all human and we still make mistakes all over again. Tell me about that story.
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? So I actually went into rehab in 2000. I remember it was October of 2000, and I remember sitting in the chair crying my heart out because that was actually the weekend of my son's birthday. And I remember telling the doctor, please don't make me go. Please don't make me go because it's my son's birthday. And I remember the doctor said to me, the best gift you could give to your son is to get sober. And so I went into rehab that weekend. I was there for several weeks. Came out of rehab. I did 3 months of like outpatient support groups around recovery. I visited several AA groups, and I know the wonderful work that AA does because I've seen people rise from the dead like Lazarus when they come through AA. But that didn't do a whole lot for me. I really found my recovery through faith groups. So I joined a lot of support groups in the church, but I came out of rehab. And then for the next 2 years, I was on and off drinking, right? Because I was really in denial. When I was in rehab, the doctor explained to me that I was living with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety disorder. And I just completely rejected that because, you know, I grew up in the household, Black folks don't get depressed. So I didn't pay any attention to that. And they gave me, you know, antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, and I flushed those down the toilet because I figured if I have to choose a drug, it's going to be alcohol. So I continued to drink even after I came out of rehab. I just did a very good job of hiding it because I didn't want to lose my job. But the time that I got sober 2 years later, whole 2 years later. So this is November, Thanksgiving weekend of 2002. I shared this with you, Jeanine. I had a friend who came to spend the weekend with us. She brought her 2 boys, and my 2 kids were all around the same age. So she brought her kids, and she knew that I was on and off the wagon, and she came with a bottle of wine. Well, I had never been so excited in my life, because I would be sober for a couple of months, and then I would start drinking again. I'd be sober for a couple of months and start drinking again. And my kids at the time were like 12 and 14. And so I kept, every time I would, start drinking, I would promise them that it would never happen again. They would always manage to bust me with a glass in my hand. And I'll never forget this day. I was sitting in the living room, and my girlfriend Pearl was with me. God rest her soul. She's passed now. She pulled out this bottle, and I was so excited. I jumped up and ran to the kitchen and got 2 glasses. And I came back, and she's literally pouring the wine into the glass. And my daughter comes downstairs, who was 14 at the time. And I'll just to this day, it gives me chills. The look on her face, she had this look of like horror and disgust. I'll never forget it. And everything in me said, this is it, you're done. It was the Holy Spirit, it was the universe, whatever you want to call it, spoke to me and said, this is it, you are done. And I remember handing the glass back to my girlfriend Pearl, and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I never had a drink again after that. But I realized that if I wasn't going to drink, I had to really get my arms around this whole depression, anxiety, PTSD thing, because as long as I was drinking, I wasn't having panic attacks. As long as I was drinking, I wasn't having anxiety attacks. As long as I was drinking, I wasn't crying my eyeballs out, right? I wasn't still dealing with the pain of my mother's suicide and the divorce and a lot of other traumas I had in my life, right? And if I couldn't drink anymore, if that wasn't going to be my life coping strategy anymore, then I had to wrap my arms around how I was going to live with this depression and anxiety. And that was really the beginning of all of the mental health and wellness advocacy work that I do. That is my life's passion, my life's work. I believe that all of my years in active alcoholism was to bring me to this purpose. And like so many of you said on the panel, if one person gets clean or gets sober from listening to this panel, then all of my years in addiction have been worth it, because I had to learn how to wrap my arms around managing depression and anxiety so that I could stay clean and sober. And that's so important. Every time I speak, every time I teach, my mission is, if just one person gets clean and sober, if one person comes to realize that it really, really does get better every single day in recovery. You deserve better. You can have better. You can do better. You just have to take that first step. So yeah, 2 years it took me to get the bandwidth and the wherewithal, but it was worth it for me to get where I am today.
Hey, Jeanine, Mike Murphy, if the Talmud tells us that if you save one life, you save the world. And this fellowship, I think, uniquely prepares us, the folks on this panel, to handle the COVID-19 lockdowns, because as many people, everybody in the fellowship knows, and others beyond, we try to live life one day at a time, and we practice acceptance. When we finish this up, we say that we accept the things we cannot change. Please be assured that I know I can't change what's going on in this pandemic world, but I can certainly live within myself and live life one day at a time as a sober adult.
Panel, let me tell you something. I promised myself that for the first LaRuelist Cafe, that I would not cry, and I had blinked back my tears a few times. This has been a lot more than I could have ever asked for, because I know I don't have to ask the question. I feel it in my heart. There is someone out there today, and Michael, you're right, even if it's only one person on YouTube or on Facebook, there is someone out there right now whose life has been saved because we came on today for 45 minutes. And I want to say to them, outside of a pandemic, we all have something. None of us are perfect. And as you see from the players here, they can be the son of a governor. They can be a tall, blonde lady who comes out of Morris County. They can be a woman whose father is a great Olympian and just everything to live for. It can be a man who went to Vietnam, the son of a preacher woman. It does not matter. All of us have something. And I want to thank each of you for coming out of your anonymity and talking real talk. And let's end this session today. I'm going to call it a room. We're in a cafe, but we're in the room. Let's
Thank you.
end the session today. And those of you who are viewing it right now, feel free to say it with us. And if you're home alone and you've got to talk to your soul, scream it out. We're going to do this serenity prayer. Michael, as I would say in church, would you lead us in prayer, please? Go for it. God.
Well, the first thing we do is a moment of silence for this still suffering out there.
Yes, sir.
And God,
God,
grant
Grant
us
us
serenity.
serenity.
Bring serenity.
Cannot change.
Accept things that cannot change. Courage to change things I
I
can.
can, and the wisdom to know
And
the
the wisdom
difference.
knows the difference.
That thy
God's will,
not
not
mine,
ours.
God.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good 24.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
God
Jeanine.
bless everybody,
Thank you.
and one day at a time.
One
One
day.
day at a time. God bless.
There you go.
God bless.
God bless.
Check it out.